it's like, what do you know is to hand my kids the faith of, say, we'll just use Life Church since it's local context, it's big, and we've already mentioned it, but it's like, all right, church is a few rock songs and a really handsome, charismatic, and they're good at their craft of what they're doing. It's like, that's not what I'm, but it's like, what is the Christian faith, and what is that? And I think there's several things related to why did your parents not feel the urgency or the need to pass down some, even though they were giving you identity by going to church 3 times a week, there's a reality there that you're talking about, the pain related to that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also culturally this sense of like, they didn't even tell you where to go, like, go be whoever you want to be.
Yeah.
That's kind of the ethos that we were handed, which is like, what is your dreams, and just be who you want to be. And instead of giving them an identity, and even though it's like, so the world gives you an idea, the world says, pick your identity, it can be any color of the rainbow, just pick it, it's yours, go. But if you tell them to be Anglican, how dare you tell them to be Anglican? If you tell them to be Presbyterian, how dare you? Even if you tell them to be Baptist, but what does that mean? I think is kind of the question that you're also pointing at, because the whole Matthew Barrett thing that just broke through on, I don't know if you were following that story very much. And I'm going to send you guys some stuff related to my own work throughs on ecclesiastical anxiety, but it's like, at some point you do have to land it. But then the question, at least what I'm dealing with in my context, is like, how, can I give them an identity? And it's like, well, if I'm telling them to be Presbyterian, then I'm limiting all their options. They're always still there. But the thing is like, you can give them something distinct that's recognizable, that rises to the surface amongst the spirit of the age, which is like, I can't see a lot of difference between this and something else. Like, what is it that gives this identity? What is it that gives this form and shape and distinctness or saltiness, and where does that story come from? What is the story of the Church of England? What is the story of the Presbyterian Church? What is the story of the Baptist Church? Like, it's like all of that's disconnected in so many ways. And if you can't see it in, say, the vestments or in, an altar, and some very simple things, even a Bible, for goodness sake, like, you walk into a building that's a performing arts center that, like, there's some cool graphics, but at the end of the day, there's nothing Christian here.
Right.
It's an airport, it's like, and so, and I don't say, and I mean, I've been thinking so much about this related to watching Charlie Kirk's memorial service. Like, one of the things that is really interesting, and I'll just use you guys as a place to process this out loud since I have you here and we're on the topic, but it's like, hopefully you don't feel bad me saying use you guys. I don't like that statement very well.
Hey, we're here. You're bringing the potluck.
Okay.
Right. You're bringing your dish.
Here's my dish in estuary. I think about, there was so much, at least from the conservative circles I follow on Twitter, there's so much like exuberance related to, and I heard this from Catholics. I heard this from a lot, like not just evangelicals. Like, I heard there was this sense of like, wow, like the gospel, and we came around Christ. And I agreed actually with that. But the thing is that what happened with this whole movement, and I started thinking about this my junior year of high school back in like 2001. I wrote my advanced U.S. history class said, write a history paper about anything related to history in the United States. And I chose Christian music because I was a good evangelical boy trying to be a worship leader in 2001. And I also wanted, to like kind of show people like, I'm a Christian. And so, the Jesus movement, the hippie movement, Billy Graham, Michael W. Smith, Amy Grant, Petra and to DC Talk and to, you know,
Reliant K.
Third Day. And then all of a sudden the rock and roll like just completely merged. It was like, if you look at Third Day's Offering albums, like that was like with Passion happening at the same time. There was like an inflection that took place, and that was all built off of like U2 and you know, campfire music. And then it's like, well, here's the rock show. And then there was like the amphitheater thing that U2 was doing. Hillsong hit it. You have Chris Tomlin and you have like Hillsong, and it's like these things. And what does it mean that Chris Tomlin was the last person to speak before the dignitaries started? Like last person, like what does that visually mean? And the fact on the ground is that his music is played more until probably 2015. His music was played more across the world than any artist in the whole world. Chris Tomlin. You have to understand that that's actually massive culturally. You know, and he gets up there and sings How Great Is Our God, and probably 80 to 90% of the 70,000 people that were in that room actually already knew that song. That's a big deal. What does that mean? Here, I'll tell you what I think it means.
Please do.
I think it means that there is actually a place for that, but that the problem happened was that Billy Graham in the 80s, and this wasn't a problem, but he would go into a town and he would get 50,000 people to show up to a stadium, and he'd have, you know, the music in the 80s was probably still very traditional Baptist hymnic stuff. Maybe the Gaithers were hanging out with him or something. I don't know. But it's like, and they would canvass the town before they would get all the churches information, and then the people would have their altar call. And at that point, they still actually went forward to something as opposed to scanning a QR code.
Yeah.
Which is what happened at the thing. But here's the thing. There are going to be people there is literally going to be people who will look back to that moment in their life and something significantly changed in how they relate to God. That's just, I can't say that didn't happen for a lot of people that at Charlie Kirk's thing. So what do we do with that? What do we do that Bishop Barron was there? What do we do that there was Greek, all sorts of people? What does that mean? And, you know, Paul used the word metagelical, but my biggest thing is that what Billy Graham did is like these people would have that experience, and then all the churches they would go back to, by and large, were traditional Protestant churches. And that's what would be formed in their traditions with that faith that was that moment, that kind of revivalistic thing. But then they would go back to these Protestant churches and Catholic churches, probably, you know, even at that time. And it's like, or that would happen on TV sometimes, but they would be going to their, you know, mom and pop church in nowhere, Arkansas, you know, but they would hear the gospel from Billy Graham, and it would make sense. And the problem that happened is when we decided to make every Sunday a Billy Graham crusade.
Yep.
And that changed everything. And it actually broke down relationality in churches. And when you moved, and you talked about your dad being involved in SCA, so you kind of understand parachurch ministry in a pretty specific way. It's like, that is like frontier ministry. Like that is when, when America was trying to be the frontier, they were trying to settle the frontier, and the Presbyterian Church would only send seminarians from like Princeton out to the frontier. They didn't want to just send lay missionaries. They wanted educated people to bring the church there. And there was a presbytery in Kentucky called Cumberland Presbytery that said, we're not waiting on you guys. We're just going to send people to share the gospel in the frontier. And so they just had lay people go out, and that created a whole nother church in the Presbyterian. And they're actually kind of Arminian, and no surprise, but it's like, but it's really interesting because, you know, but then it's kind of the same thing. Like there are no church buildings in the, you know, West, you know, in Arizona or even Oklahoma. Like it was like, you know, it was a guy preaching, you know, from maybe the back of his covered wagon or something. It's like,
right.
Okay. But then there's like, you know, so that's one piece, but the Billy Graham thing, And then you try to make every church service a Billy Graham crusade. And it is the evangelicalism is about the good news, the message. And so what I see at Charlie Kirk's thing was there being the true spirit of evangelion happening. But there's no icons. The only icons you see. So if you can't get past Billy, if you only stay at Billy Graham, you will only ever see Billy Graham as an icon. If you only stay at Chris Tomlin, you will only see Chris Tomlin as an icon. You will only see Charlie Kirk's picture on the stage because there was no real Christian symbolism. And that's normal in when we've laid that back onto the seeker movement and back onto the stuff. And so I just think that is what the problem is, that a decision to follow Christ is then said, and let's just keep going to camp every Sunday for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And we had some friends visit our church a few weeks ago, and they had gone to, another church in town that was much more like that. And they were like, the wife just came up to me. I've known her for so many years. And since her husband is one of my best friends since we were like 14. And she was like, are we just like going to go to church camp the rest of our lives? And I was like, oh, interesting. Are we ever going to get a chance to grow up?
Yep.
And I think that's part of the impetus of what you're feeling. And it's like, because I was at a church, I was hired because a church started in our town in the early 2000s. And they actually brought me on at 16 to lead worship because they were playing Chris Tomlin off the music player. And they were like, we want somebody real. And I was like the only person in our town that was doing that. So they hired me. And I, have thoughts about hiring 16-year-olds to lead churches, but that's a thought for another day. But the other thing too was like, because of all those lusty things you were talking about earlier. And so it's like, okay, beside the point, the reason that church started is because a football coach in our town went to the State Baptist youth camp, and there were 2,000 kids singing these worship songs. And he's like, where are these people going to go? And so it's like, we need to make a church that will meet them at this. And that was like, the worship wars and everything else. But it's like, as I look back and I think about that, at the expense of passing a tradition down and an identity down. But there's something to the lowest common denominator of pop culture Christianity related to evangelism, that I think that there is something about that. Because why was Bishop Barron calling Charlie Kirk, a Christian that died? And why was he saying he's an evangelical? And what was it about? Because it's the broadest, lowest common denominator. Like,
yeah.
How many Catholics listen to K-Love?
Right.
A lot.
That's actually been a struggle for me as we're looking at a conversion into these older faith traditions. Is like, what do you do with, who's that guy that y'all like to listen to a lot?
Josiah Queen.
Josiah Queen. And what do you do with
the kids love it. I've
Christian pop culture. What do you do with the Christian pop culture?
Yeah, because the kids love that music, right? Like she listens to it a lot. What do you do with the K-Love?
It's better than the other stuff that's on.
Because the Orthodox would say,
secular music.
What would they say?
That's not worship.
Well, and
I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. If that's not worship, that's what I've called worship my whole life. What do you mean that's not worship?
I would say it's. Well, go ahead.
Oh, it's probably not. Oh, okay. The thing you said about like meeting them where they are in that. In the last year, I've looked at him in the anger stage, and said, if Jesus is gonna meet me where I'm at, I'll be at Chili's with a plate of cheese fries, and we can have a conversation. But
communion, that's the Eucharist,
right? Okay, so
whoa.
But then we go
a fractal of the
fractal. Yeah, well, I mean, isn't it all? Isn't it all?
But at the same time, if I'm at Chili's with a bucket of cheese fries, that would be delicious right now. And
I'm thinking about it. It's already closed. Right?
We're having this conversation. He is there. So how to marry that with the mess that's going on in evangelicalism is really hard for me.
One of the most interesting feedbacks I've gotten on this is my conversation with Eric, who has a really cool YouTube channel. His dad's a pastor at a mega church in Southern California, and he's Baptist, but he's very Pajoian and Petersonian, and how he's even teaching Bible studies at his church. And he's like, the worship is music and communion is the hardest part for me. It's like the community's there, like the trust is there. And he's like, but the crazy thing is I can like listen to these songs in my car. And he's like, and I can, but at church, it doesn't connect. And I was this guy that's been commenting on my channel for a long time. He's got a YouTube channel. It was like about weight loss, but his name's Butter Bob Briggs or something like that. It's around the corner. He's Orthodox. And he said, on one of my Charlie Kirk things that I did, he was like, I've been listening, or it was on Twitter, maybe. He responded to something I wrote on Twitter, because I've kind of fleshed some of these ideas out on Twitter. But I was like, he said, I've been listening back to those songs from the Charlie Kirk Memorial over and over again. And I'm like, what is this? What is that thing? And why are so many, even like people that are rad trad people I see on Twitter, like excited about Charlie Kirk's memorial service? And I even had another guy that was like, he's got a cool YouTube channel called Canon and Creed, Protestant Apologetics. And I've engaged with him a little on X before. And he was like, hot take, like they should be not doing this on the Lord's Day, and there should be, a sermon and sacrament, a word and sacrament, or something like that. And I was like, they're evangelicals. What are you trying to hold them to? What are you trying to hold them to? Like, let them be and focus on, if you think this is right, then you need to call the people that are, and that's one of these big questions between Protestantism and evangelicalism. And I like to actually make that distinction pretty clear, because I think that doing the work of evangelism is what kind of was happening, but it was not. And I think that like the music is evangelistic in a sense. And Chris Tomlin gets up there and he's basically, saying like one of the only things he said is just that Jesus is Lord of all. Like, I'm okay with it. Are you okay with that? I'm okay with that. Like, what do you
can't argue there, right?
And you're like, but, and I think that there's one of the reckonings that we're going to have to in the near future with all of this, like you were saying, 10 to 15 years is, and this goes back to kind of a Petersonian, Pajoian like hierarchy of meaning and value, but we have to figure out the right place for that. Like, and there's like a right place. And the way that I've tried to frame it is something like concert and carnival on Friday night is right. Conference on Saturday, brunch and conference on Saturday, like TED Talk and some pop is right.
Right.
And then like something reverent and holy at the highest on Sunday. And it's not that these things that they don't have like their proper place. Like when I went to the Symbolic World Summit, Friday night was Martin Shaw telling a story. And then it was Neil deGrasse and this, rock opera stuff. And I was like, and then Saturday was all conferencey. And then Sunday, a bunch of them went to liturgy. Yeah. I was like, that just seems to make sense. Something seems to make sense about that. And without kind of like getting into this Martin Luther, like, oh my gosh, modern worship, I was just hate myself. Like, oh, what do I, like, that's probably not good, like, yeah, like you said, like I went to a 24-hour worship music vigil, and I think, to your point about self, like, because of the sola fide mentality, divorced from history and tradition, is how I would put that. You get this thing where if you're in anything short of sin will do to reach you. Okay. So like, and what does that mean? That means that we will evangelicalism is offering the message, right? This is the message. This is the good news. And so if all you're doing is receiving, you're consuming. Here it is in the song, here it is in the message, here it is. And worship, an act of worship that you already outlined is like, there has to be something. I think the Greek is kenotic. I think it's self-giving. There has to be something offering. And so, in a liturgical frame, there's like a call and there's a response. And every part of the liturgy is a call and a response. The message and, a confession and a response, a sermon and a response, the meal and a response, benediction and doxology. And so it's like, to me, helping the world like see that pattern more clearly, because it's obfuscated right now with the feels, as you said earlier. And as somebody that has been a practitioner of this stuff, was for most of my life, and now it's like, not everybody's in that position. And so to push that out into the world in a certain way. But I do think that finding a place that honors that form, and being like, I could maybe journey with these people. Maybe they have the bones here, maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's not capital O or the dot. This is the right, but maybe their bones are there, and there's a community that, they might be a little older, but that's actually an opportunity for leadership. That's an opportunity, this is kind of the Redeemed Zoomer thing, but it's kind of the opportunity for you having to be able to have an impact and invite people into something, and breathe life into a place, like you were saying, that some of the places, depending on where you're going. But that's my spiel. Go be Orthodox if you want to. Don't hear me say don't do that. I've a wonderful Orthodox friends.
Yeah, I think that there is a call to more. Like, if you look at the missionaries that from like Orthodoxy, right? They many of them put themselves in tremendous amounts of danger to take the gospel, to take Orthodoxy to people that did not know it. And they were doing everything short of sin. They were doing that. But that's not where they left people. That's not where their intention wasn't to just convert and then move to the next person. Their intention was to teach the way, to cultivate, to grow, and to instill practice, instill ritual, instill religion that deepens you, that puts you on the path to sainthood,
an identity
that gives you that identity.
Yeah.
And while the spirit of, hey, I want to share the gospel with you is great, we cannot leave it there.
Yeah.
It cannot just be conversion and now you go back to work. You go back to living your life.
Yeah.
There needs to be, that's why Paul remained, the apostle Paul remained invested in Timothy, Titus, and many others. Very likely many, many others whose names we don't know. And we have specific instruction in Scripture to Timothy to continue the practice, continue the way. So for me, I think that you framed that really nicely, and your framing there really helped me. So thank you. I think there's nothing wrong with us singing some Charlie Hall around a campfire to celebrate the truth that we have, the lives that we have because of our identities being found in Christ. There's nothing wrong with it. And then we'll drive to Chicago for a conference, right? So we'll participate in that on Saturdays, but Sundays we need to, as I believe, and I'm starting to really come to being willing to vocalize this. Sundays are holy. There needs to be a holy day.
Yeah.
And there's people who will argue what day that should be of the week, which is fine. Have that argument. I'm not there yet, but there needs to be a holy day that we approach things with reverence to truly understand, and it very likely should be sacramental and liturgical.
Yeah, and that's the thing about, is Sunday is Sunday where the optimal outsourcing of evangelism? You know, I think that's kind of the thing. And so then well, I'm an evangelical, or this is the evangelical movement, or Big Eva. Like, you kind of, that to me is kind of the spirit of the age in a sense. And it's it becomes all about reach as opposed to about you know, like the things you were saying, like away and identity and all that, those things. And there's people that are, you know, kind of pushing, you know, Comer, practicing the way, you know, there's these elements within that movement, you know, there always have been with other mystics and stuff, Willard and Richard Foster and others, but it's like, it's very hard. It's a very, very powerful. And I think that's one of the things about it, is that it's so powerful. The technique is so powerful, and I know it very well. And that's why I actually respect it. Like, there's a reason that those guys make a lot of money. There's a reason. It's very powerful, and you know, it's its own thing. And so, but there's also like questions of like, I mean, here's the interesting thing. Like, one of the tweets I made was like, I don't think people understand that someone was making like, how did they do that in a week? How in the world could they organize something like that in a week? And I said, you don't understand that this was just another Tuesday for Big Eva and Turning Point USA. This was just another Tuesday. Like, Carrie Job, you know, and Brandon Lake and everybody else, like, in their in-ears, they're getting tracks fed to them. They're getting like, hey, you know, the guys are probably, they didn't even have iPads. It was like they were probably telling them Nashville number system in their ear so that everybody knew like what chords to go, where we were headed. Like, it was like nothing. All of that is a Tuesday to make that happen. And I think that to the point where that is a strength, in a sense, that it was like, for them to get up to proclaim something true about the gospel is actually incredible. Like that can be that clear. And it was clear, I think, and so it's like, that has to be recognized, but also you look at that and you look at and even I think part of I would even say maybe the envy of people that aren't in power anymore, that looked at that thing and they're like wondering why, well, that there's like, they're the ones with power. And even if you're in an evangelical, you look how powerful we are. And let's bring that into the church, and let's be that. I think that is, well, it's not healthy. And as somebody that was told like, well, this church has that and this church has that, and we have you, like, what? Like, you know, that's where I'm coming from.
Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.